History is usually told through the lens of great men, massive wars, and revolutionary inventions. We talk about Napoleon's ego, Caesar's ambition, and the sheer industrial power of the steam engine. But what if I told you that some of the most influential players in human history weren't people at all? What if they were microscopic, multi-legged, or tube-shaped freeloaders living inside our ancestors' guts? Today we're talking about parasites. These biological hitchhikers didn't just make our forefathers itchy, they toppled empires, dictated where cities were built, and might even be the reason you like your cat a little too much. It's time to look at the puppet masters of the natural world. Let's start with the heavyweight champion of human misery, malaria. Now, malaria isn't a virus or a bacteria, it's a protozoan parasite called Plasmodium, and it has killed more humans than every war in history combined. Some scientists estimate that nearly half of all humans who have ever lived, roughly 50 billion people, died from malaria. That is a staggering statistic. If malaria were a person, it would be the most prolific serial killer in the galaxy. Take the Roman Empire. Rome had a secret weapon that protected it from invaders, but it also eventually ate the empire from the inside out. It was called the Roman fever. The marshlands around Rome were a 5-star resort for Anopheles mosquitoes. When the Goths and Vandals showed up to sack the city, they often got hit by malaria so hard they had to retreat, shivering and wondering why the Eternal City felt like a giant, humid death trap. But the Romans weren't immune, they just lived with it in a state of constant, low-grade suffering. Archaeologists have even found infant cemeteries from the 5th century filled with victims of the parasite, proving it spared no one. These outbreaks drained the economy, thinned out the army, and turned Rome into a giant, shivering infirmary. Some historians argue that Rome didn't just fall, it succumbed to a centuries-long fever dream that sapped its strength until it simply couldn't stand up anymore. It turns out, the barbarians at the gate were nothing compared to the bugs in the bedroom. Next, let's look at Napoleon Bonaparte. Big hat, big dreams, and very small enemies. In 1802, Napoleon sent a massive fleet to modern-day Haiti to crush a revolution led by Toussaint Louverture. He sent 30,000 of his best veteran troops, but they weren't just met with muskets, they were met with yellow fever. Now, technically, yellow fever is a virus, but it's delivered exclusively by a parasitic vector, the mosquito. These tiny delivery drivers were the real generals on the battlefield. Within months, over 24,000 French soldiers were dead. Napoleon was so traumatized by the loss that he gave up on the New World entirely. He basically decided to keep his swamp mosquitoes and go home, selling a massive chunk of land to the U.S. for a bargain. This was the Louisiana Purchase. We essentially owe the American Midwest to a bug. Think about that the next time you're eating a corn dog at a state fair, you're standing on land liberated by the Aedes aegypti mosquito. In ancient Egypt, the curse of the pharaohs was less about vengeful spirits and more about something squishy. The Nile gave a gift that kept on giving, schistosomiasis, or snail fever. This is caused by parasitic flatworms that live in freshwater snails. When you step in the water to farm, the larvae burrow directly through your skin. They don't even ask for a key, they just melt their way in. We've found calcified parasite eggs in mummies dating back thousands of years, proving that even royalty wasn't safe. This parasite caused chronic fatigue and organ damage, shaping Egyptian life for millennia. If the Great Pyramids took a long time to build, don't just blame the heavy blocks. Blame the worms in the workers' systems that made every day feel like a Monday morning. It's hard to be a god king when a worm is using your liver as a studio apartment. Moving to the early 20th century, we see the vampire of the American South. For decades, there was a harmful stereotype of the lazy or slow Southerner. Critics called it the germ of laziness, assuming it was a character flaw. But this wasn't a choice. It was hookworm. These parasites enter through bare feet, travel through the lungs, get coughed up and swallowed, and then latch onto the small intestine to drink your blood. In the early 1900s, up to 40% of people in the American South were infected. It caused severe anemia and cognitive fog, making people physically unable to work or study effectively. It was a cycle of poverty, fueled by biology. When a massive public health campaign provided shoes and built latrines, the laziness miraculously vanished. This parasite literally held back the economic development of an entire region for generations. Sometimes the best way to jumpstart an economy isn't a tax cut. It's just buying everyone some sturdy boots. Now we enter the sci-fi horror portion. Toxoplasma gondii. This is a parasite that can only sexually reproduce in the guts of cats, but it can infect almost any warm-blooded animal, including humans. When it infects a rat, it rewires the rat's brain to make it attracted to the smell of cat urine. The rat walks right up to the cat, gets eaten, and the parasite gets back to its home. Mission accomplished. But about 1/3 of humans carry toxocysts in their brains. Newer studies suggest it might subtly influence behavior, making people more prone to risk-taking or neuroticism. Think about how many historical mad kings or reckless generals might have been nudged by a parasite that just wanted them to be a bit more daring. We might think we have free will, but maybe we're just being steered by our cat's roommates. Even our symbols of medicine are linked to parasites. Take the guinea worm, a parasite that lives under your skin and has to be slowly wound around a stick over the course of weeks to remove it. If you pull too fast, it breaks, and you're in for a world of infection. Some medical historians believe the rod of Asclepius, the snake wrapped around a pole that you see on every ambulance, isn't a snake at all. It might be a tribute to the ancient doctors who had to slowly crank a guinea worm out of a patient's leg. Imagine that. The very symbol of modern healthcare might be a how-to guide for removing a 3-foot-long worm from your calf. Talk about humble beginnings for the medical profession. Finally, consider the traders on the Silk Road. They brought spices and silk, but they also brought a biological luggage set. Ancient latrine digs have found Chinese liver fluke thousands of miles from its home, proving that these stowaways traveled the world right alongside Marco Polo. These parasites forced the development of public sanitation and even religious dietary laws. Many ancient traditions regarding food safety, like the prohibition of pork or ritual washing, likely evolved as a cultural defense mechanism against parasites like trichinella. Our cultures weren't just built in a vacuum, they were built as bunkers to keep the worms out. Even the way we cook meat today is essentially a long-standing war tactic in our battle against these invisible invaders. We like to think of ourselves as the masters of our domain, the authors of our own destiny. But history shows that we are often just a walking ecosystem for things much smaller than us. Parasites didn't just hitch a ride on the human journey, they frequently grabbed the steering wheel. They influenced where we lived, how we worked, and who we went to war with. Next time you're reading a history book and an army mysteriously retreats or a civilization fades away, don't just look at the politics, look at the water, look at the mosquitoes, and look at the gut. History isn't just written in blood and ink. It's written in larvae, eggs, and the quiet, persistent struggle against the hitchhikers within. If you found this deep dive into our microscopic history fascinating, or just sufficiently gross, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Thanks for watching.